All right, now a troubling issue is now returning to the fore as individuals and governments worldwide begin to fear an incursion on their rights to free speech, and this following the permanent removal of President Trump from social media platforms. Shares of Twitter, Facebook, and Google's Alphabet Inc. now dropping dramatically to the tune of billions of dollars in the wake of the banning of President Trump from social media. Twitter and Facebook claiming that the move was over violations of their community standards and guidelines. The tweet in question, President Trump writing that the 75 million great American patriots who voted for me, America first and make America great again, will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. And, to all of those who asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. Then this, in addition to the banning of alternative competing social media platform Parler from the Google, Amazon, and Apple app stores. But far from the only person or company to be abruptly banned from service and with little to no transparency, citizens worldwide are growing concerned over the true hold these companies command over free speech and the free marketplace itself. This as even libertarian former presidential candidate Ron Paul was blocked from his own social media account for calling out the chilling attack on free expression and exchange of ideas.
I mean, I think that's in the public commentary right now, trying to figure out how much clout should social media organizations have on the messaging. They've tried to do I think these companies try to do their best, but human beings are human beings. And, each one has their own political and social biases. So it's tough to ignore or tough to end around what the leaders of these organizations' bias are in what is the end product of the messaging. So it's tough to decide who's the police on that. Yes, they are private organizations, but because they do have so much clout in the world, it's a little bit of a seesaw to try to figure out, how to manage this. So I think there's, good, there's strong comments and complaints on both sides.
Chaim Siegel going on to add that the stock drop also reflects the expectations that legislation may soon follow, enforcing antitrust laws and maybe even revoking these companies' Section 230 liabilities immunity, which would have a devastating effect on their operations. And again, these concerns far extend beyond the borders of the United States, where these companies sit.
Das Grundrecht auf Meinungsfreiheit ist ein Grundrecht von elementarer Bedeutung. Und in dieses Grundrecht kann eingegriffen werden, aber entlang der Gesetze und innerhalb des Rahmens, den der Gesetzgeber definiert, nicht nach dem Beschluss der Unternehmensführung von Social-Media-Plattformen. Unter dem Aspekt sieht die Bundeskanzlerin es als problematisch an, dass jetzt die Konten des US-Präsidenten dauerhaft gesperrt wurden.
There is a general consensus developing in many places that it can't just be left to the tech platforms because they are also driven by their commercial interests. So it's got to be some authority which is able to move quickly. And ultimately, I suspect the matter will have to be finally arbitrated through some sort of judicial process.
So is free speech and free market enterprise truly under the thumb of major media corporations like Twitter, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon? And if so, what can be done? Here to discuss is attorney Jonathan Klinger, legal counsel for the Israeli digital rights movement. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, are our rights being infringed?
Well, let's go back to how you began presenting this issue. Governments do not have a right for free speech, and barring government officials from speech, especially when they're lying and inciting violence, is not the provision of the right for speech. Unlike what's going on with other activists or political candidates, going against government officials is somewhat justified. Don't forget, Trump himself blocked a lot of people from following him on Twitter. Trump himself incited for violence. He said when the looting starts, the shooting starts. So blocking him was totally justified.
Well, with respect, those were not the tweets that got him banned. Just to be fair, those are not the tweets that got him banned. And again, I'm not talking about the government's right to free speech. I'm talking about an individual's, as all of us collectively. Which Trump, you're saying he's behaving as an individual.
Right, but don't look at Trump as the person whose rights should be protected. If you want to protect someone's right, go to the small town activist or for the Black Lives Matter protesters. Those guys are
but Jonathan,
receiving a lot
who
of
are we to decide? Who are we to decide whose rights are protected and whose aren't? I mean, isn't that the basis of free speech?
Well, free speech is not your right to be violent against others. Trump specifically called for violence when he said, "I will not be attending the inauguration." Their interpretation was, at least by Twitter, is that by saying so, he's calling out for his loyal followers, those patriots that he masks, to go there and to act violently. That's why they decided to ban him.
Again, I think that we can argue whether or not we can argue how people interpret
that
a tweet.
Was the official Twitter statement.
That was the official Twitter statement. The official Twitter statement, yes, you're right, was that he does not plan to go to the inauguration. How other individuals interpret that statement is up to them.
I will not go to.
How other people interpret "I'm not going to the inauguration" is completely up to them, and I'm not agreeing with that interpretation. However, what I'm asking you is whether or not these major companies have a right to infringe on individuals' free speech. At this point, I'm not even talking about Trump.
So what I think is that we're facing a big problem. The problem is that these platforms have a happy trigger finger going and blocking too many people. Now, these blockings are a lot of the times due to government requests, meaning not things that they decided to block by themselves, but because the US, the Israeli, the Russian, the Chinese government contacted them, asked for the removal of content, those guys removed the content. And that's a bigger problem than going and deciding later on what's going to be removed from Twitter. Now, as I see it, the problem with here is the conflict of interest. Legislators pay a lot of money to advertise on Facebook. They get donations from these big organizations later on. They also get their power from their followers. So they will not legislate against Facebook because they fear them. Now, I don't think that people will go and cancel Section 230 because, well, most politicians want Facebook on their side. Facebook can decide just to, reduce the exposure of one specific candidate, right, and they'll kill him in the polls. No one will follow him later on. So I don't think that Facebook would wound down or be dismantled so quickly.
Well, I think that we can agree that a private entity with its own corporate interests deciding whether or not a certain political candidate gets any sort of runtime is a scary thought, especially because, as I think you can agree, the pendulum always swings. But unfortunately, that's all our time. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.